All right, hey guys. So in this video, we're going to talk about what Weber was doing in sociology. And the short answer is he's doing history. The whole point of sociology for Weber is to come up with concepts that he would be able to use to analyze what has really happened with human beings on this planet. Um, Marx wanted to understand society, to understand how capitalism worked, and Durkheim wanted to understand how society worked in general. For Weber, there is no real thing called society. He said the reduction of empirical reality to laws is meaningless. A systematic science of culture would be senseless. I mean, he's hostile to this whole enterprise of basically what this course is studying, the idea that there's a thing called society and then you can understand it. Um, the whole reason that he studied society, and I don't even know if he would use that term. He probably did because he contradicted himself all the time as well. Super cool guy, though. I mean, I love studying him, but he's very interesting, but just very self-contradictory, kind of ornery about what he was on about. So anyway, what he's doing is trying to understand what are the key concepts that he could use to understand causality in history. What made, and really importantly, I'm going to jump down here to complex causality. He wouldn't say, like Marx would say, the economy exists and then it influences the culture. Remember, Marx talked about how you've got these social relations and then out of them emanate ideologies. Weber would say sometimes, but sometimes it would go the other way. It depends on the particular historical events that you're talking about. There isn't some law that says the economy influences the culture or some law that says the culture influences the economy. What there are is a bunch of people doing stuff, and if you really pay attention, if you really study it and try to understand it, you can figure out why in this one instance this thing happened. You can understand causality in one instance, and then you have to start all over. You'll use the same concepts, but the causality might be different in a different instance. Okay, so that's what he's up to. You study sociology in order to be able to gain concepts to study history. All right. Three main tools that we're going to talk about in this class. This is not an exhaustive list of Weber's conceptual tools. And the guy was a genius. He was brilliant, and he studied everything. So, but these are sort of the big ones that, as a student of sociology, you have to understand. First one is ideal types, and this one is going to create sticking points possibly for you. It still does for me, and I've been doing this stuff for a long, long time. The idea of an ideal type is that it is a generalization. I'm going to read off my script so that you get exactly what I want you to have. They are generalizations, first of all, that are logically constructed by being derived inductively from the real world of social history. So what that means is he's studying social history. Remember, there isn't society, there's just stuff that's happened. And he studies it and looks for patterns, and then what he does is he derives from that a concept that he then says, okay, so this concept seems to be something that exists in this historical case, and in this historical case, and in this historical case as well. So this is a thing that sometimes happens. But what he does, the reason that we call them ideal types, and this is where it gets complicated for me, and it may get complicated for you as well. When he talks about an ideal type, like we will talk about the ideal type later on of bureaucracy, because that was a big deal to him. And I will give you a bunch of elements of bureaucracy, a bunch of elements isn't the best word, a bunch of components of the ideal type of bureaucracy. And you will at first say, yeah, that makes sense. Like if I think about the university, yeah, it's got those elements. But then you'll think, but you know, actually, not all the time, or not, or maybe it's got these four, but not this couple. And that's the thing. Weber says that these ideal types are not things that you would see in real life. They are conceptual constructs that we use to understand what's going on. They're like, well, I mean, that's the idea of ideal types kind of comes from from Plato and Plato's ideal, Platonic ideals, things that we can understand in a perfect way, but that manifest themselves in kind of less perfect ways, because it's going to be human beings that are putting them into place. So we'll talk about bureaucracy. I will use examples of bureaucracy. And what you have to understand is, just because a particular bureaucracy doesn't match exactly Weber's definition, that doesn't mean his definition is wrong. Weber's ideal types, he would say, of course they're not going to match. They're concepts that I'm using to help me understand history. Okay, so that's it for ideal types, I think. Oh, wait, one other thing. He also says that because, and this would make sense for a guy who is not studying society, he's studying social events. He says, look, as we progress through history, we have to come up with new ideal types. Remember, Durkheim would say there are these sort of social facts that exist. And what Weber would say is, well, and social facts are not the same as ideal types. But Weber would say you can look at a society, or I'm sorry, Durkheim would say you can look at this society and you can see these components of it. Those are social facts. Weber would say, as people decide to do different things, that means you're going to have to come up with different conceptual constructs to explain what they did. So the list of ideal types that he comes up with, writing in the early 1900s, he would say, well, you're not going to use just those, and maybe some of them you won't use at all in the 21st century. It's a different time. People are doing different things. So you have to keep coming up with ideal types. A student of history needs to understand that you're going to have to inductively derive new concepts as you study new historical phenomena. Oh, and the last thing he would say is, and I kind of was alluding to this point earlier, don't confuse your concepts, your ideal types that don't really exist. Don't confuse them for reality. Reality is, and if you're studying something and you're like, well, this doesn't fit my definition. Well, yeah, it doesn't, because your definition is this ideal type. It's not supposed to. It doesn't have to. What it has to do is be a useful explanatory tool, or else ditch it and find something else. Second concept, and I'm going to butcher this word because I don't speak German. This is a German word, Verstehen, something like that. It means understanding, but you have to get Verstehen because the people who talk about Weber are going to talk about Verstehen. What it means is understanding, but it doesn't mean my understanding of social history. What it means is history is about studying interactions, the interactions among people, and in order to understand them, you have to get what was in those people's heads, how they understood what they were doing. So if I'm going to study America in the post-World War II era, as America becomes a superpower, I can't be thinking in terms of my understanding of the world because I'm a 21st century person. I have to get myself into the head of a person in the 1950s. What were they thinking? How did they understand what was going on? What was the meaning of different things to them? That's what Verstehen means. So when you are studying, for us, society, for Weber, social history, you have to make an effort to understand what meaning things had to the people you are studying. Now, Weber's not, he considers himself more of a historian, but this idea of understanding the meaning things hold to other people, this is the root of a major sort of theoretical school in sociology called symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism is all about the idea of what is the meaning that the actors have in their interactions. How do they understand things, and then why do they do things based on that understanding? So Weber, even though he's not trying to be a sociologist so much as he's trying to be a historian, he creates something foundational for sociologists. Okay, so Verstehen, the importance of the meaning things had to the people you are studying. And then third, and I alluded to this earlier, he has a complex understanding of causality. In some instances, the economy might influence the government. In other instances, the government might influence the economy. In some cases, ideas might influence the way people relate to each other. And in other cases, the way people relate to each other might influence the ideas. Nothing is necessarily one way to Weber. Whereas for Marx, for Durkheim, they're looking for sociological laws. Weber's not doing that. So just because you understand how causality works in one particular historical situation, you can't then say, well, then this is how social life proceeds. Weber would say, of course it doesn't. People are complicated. They're constantly making meanings of things, and they are, and so each historical incident could be different. That's it. That's Weber. He's studying sociology in order to understand history. These ideas kind of undergird his efforts. And so in the next video, what we want to get at is, if history is interactions, if that's what he sees, he doesn't see society having an influence. What he sees, or at least what he tells us he sees, because he does end up studying macro level stuff, what he tells us he sees is just people interacting. We need to figure out, what does he see when he's looking at interactions? What are the categories of interactions? So that'll be our next video.